How long does it take to build a house? Let's say a 100-lot community, and so how long does it typically take to build a single lot?
There's a reason why vast majority of builders only do vertical.
Horizontal is not building floors and countertops. It's actually...
When you're talking about horizontal construction, you're usually talking about vacant land, meaning there's nothing on it besides trees, grass, rock.
We still got to go up with the monkey bars and stuff like that.
Can you walk me through the step-by-step process of what it looks like to basically get that land ready?
That $10,000 sounds minuscule versus $1 million, $1.5 million loss.
We're building massive businesses. We've been obviously in this country, largest transfers of wealth. Baby boomers just coming of age. If you buy a business, you have...
Welcome back to the KB podcast. Happy Tuesday to everyone. I have a couple of my colleagues on here, Mr. Daniel Patrick and Andrew Clements. Guys, today we're going to be discussing, since this is kind of our industry, horizontal development versus vertical construction. And Andrew, I know you had a question from one of the investors that you spoke to earlier. I'm going to let you jump in first. So what do you got?
I think it's always good to hear from you because you're the head of snake over here, but just give people like a relatively deep breakdown understanding of key differences between horizontal development and vertical construction. What do those look like?
And I think it was either you or Daniel had someone say something funny, which you can jump in that in just a minute, but horizontal construction. So when you're talking about horizontal construction, you're usually talking about vacant land, meaning there's nothing on it besides trees, grass, rock, whatever. So when you do horizontal, you got to go into the entitlement process. The entitlement process is basically getting it approved. What do we want to build there? Do we want to build retail, commercial buildings, or are we looking to build residential, which right now we're focused on residential. We do have some retail stuff that we're going to work on, but we'll jump into that a little bit more on a different podcast. On that, we're trying to get it approved for residential homes. Now, what type of residential homes? Are they multifamily, single family? What are we trying to do there? Most of ours is single family, could be villas, a mix or both. So we go through the entitlement process. Once that's done, the horizontal construction can begin once we close on that land, meaning we're going to go in, we're going to remove the trees, we're going to start grading the land, and we're going to start putting in all the infrastructure. So for a subdivision, you need water, electric, sewer, landscaping, roads, sidewalks. And since I like to build homes, not houses, kind of like what I went over in the past, some amenities, to make it more feel like a home where you got a place where you create memories with your family. So, and then on the vertical side, I think you understand that. Most people do understand the vertical side. It's just building a home. You got to put the basement in, put up all the framing, walls, drywall, HVAC, electrical, roof, everything that goes into building a home.
What would you say are the hardest parts, the horizontal construction and the vertical construction? Like if you could name like two pieces from each that are difficult that you have to plow through on each and every.
Well, because the hardest parts are not actually the physical part. It's usually just finding the right team. So like when you're going into a new, let's call it territory region, just find the right teams. You always make mistakes when you're looking for the right teams initially. It's the same thing when you're dating a girl. You have to find the right one, right? You don't just pick the first one usually. And I've seen that some of the people I grew up with in high school, they're still with the same women, but you want to find the right teams that can do the job and they can do it right. I know that's not the best answer because you wanted two things on both sides, but that's the hardest part, honestly.
Well, it just seems like once you get that all solved, it makes for a much easier process all the way through because you know exactly who's going to deliver what throughout that process.
Think about it. Even pre that, like you have to have that person, like say we opened up a region over in Texas. I'm not familiar with Texas. I don't need to be. I need to find the right person. Let's call it his name, Andrew Clements. He goes, opens up our Texas division. I rely on him to know Texas and him to make sure he picks out the right pieces of land. That is your biggest piece of the puzzle. Someone that finds the land could get it under contract. Communicates well and could help you start building that site out. So that's your biggest piece of the puzzle right off the rip. And then finding those companies that you work with. So those are your two big points.
So in summary, horizontal is not building floors and countertops. It's actually...
Well, it is. I mean, it is horizontal.
Well, I mean, if we really want to get technical, I know it's not uncommon for some of our communities to have things like playgrounds and soccer fields and stuff like that. I mean, we still got to go up with the monkey bars and stuff like that. That's still all bundled into the horizontal piece. But I mean, I think that's pretty easy to understand. Like if you're preparing the land for the builder to come in, you could pretty much just say it's all horizontal work. Even if you have to build a gazebo or a picnic area here and there, it's still
build some. No, absolutely. Yeah. But you got to remember, even like some things that I believe to be on horizontal, you got to put them into the vertical aspect. So like tap fees, for example. I forgot what they are, but we have a project that's about $1.5 million in just tap fees alone. That initially we put on the horizontal side because we got to pay for it, but we embedded over on the vertical. If we're building the homes, if we're not, we make the builder build that in. So they pay us that extra amount, which is usually $13,000 per lot for Walton County, Florida.
And what in the world is a tap fee? Is that where they like tie in the home to the infrastructure that we've laid down? What is a tap?
Yeah, no, exactly. So you're tapping it into, the water, everything that's part of the sewer system. So you're tapping it into that. And they just have to have special devices that handle a lot of that. And the cool part is, even if you don't know anything about that, you just have to know that fee's there and where to put it at. For our side, we would put it on the vertical aspect. So, and it sounds like a horizontal thing because that's where the water, electric, sewer, everything is put in at. So it is a horizontal, but we move that fee over to the vertical because that's where it's going to end up at.
Pretty cool. I have a kind of a strange question here, but I'm going to throw it out there anyways. On average, how long does it take to build a house in, let's say, a 100-lot community, and vice versa? How long does it typically take to build a single lot?
Okay, so house is easy answer. Depends on house. Average home, you should have it down pat as long as you have your subs in place. 5 months for the average house. You should be able to run that.
From the lot side, it's probably more tranched out because you're doing a bunch all at once, right? So, like,
Well, I was going to ask you to define that. So, are you talking about just a one-off lot, or
let's say a
a
tranche of
subdivision?
lot. Let's say it's a 100-lot community and they're taking down, 10 lots per quarter. How long would it take to get those 10 lots prepped and ready to go?
Average 6 months.
And with the scale of, you said 5 months to build a house, like if you're building 10 at once, does it still take 5 months? Does that take 8 months?
If you're building all 5 at once or 8 at once or whatever it was. Yeah. So, I mean, it depends. Depends on how many subs you have again. Are you putting 2 or 3 subs on, that you're bringing on just for basements? Yeah. Okay. You can probably do it in 6 months, 7 months. If you're only doing one sub, that's probably going to take 10 months to build those 5 because they have to do one basement, move to the next, move to the next. They're within 2 to 3 weeks of each other. So once you get the basement done, the framers come in. As soon as the next basement is done, those framers at the first house move over to the second house. So you're going to have, basically a 3-month time delay there, give or take.
And would you say that's how you operate your business from kind of like top to bottom? Is that's from a cyclical manner? That's how most of these projects are going through on the vertical and the horizontal side. Kind of people are kind of moving through from piece to piece.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I've went over this. We hire the best companies out there. Like you don't want, like I've tried doing the horizontal side internally. I'll call that live and learn. That's the best thing I can say. I bought all the big equipment, bought all the dozers and everything. And not saying we can't do it, but it was a lot of babysitting, and I hate saying that because there's, some great guys out there in that industry, but we were non-union and there's just a lot of things happen if I'm not out there nonstop. So outsourcing it to companies like Bear or Kolb or any of those big guys locally, Howell & Sons, they know what they're doing and they usually get it done a lot quicker than I personally have my team do it. And they usually do it cheaper. It's a win-win-win. When sometimes you think you can do it better or cheaper, proven very wrong on my first project that I did here in Missouri.
This is my last question, Daniel, and I'm going to let you jump in. But this is actually a question even more so for me, obviously for the audience and all of our loyal followers as well. But on the horizontal side, can you walk me through like the step-by-step piece of, you have this, let's say 50-acre parcel. It's got a bunch of trees on it. It's not graded yet. Like, can you walk me through the step-by-step process of what it looks like to basically get that land ready? You're taking out the trees first, are you grading it next, then putting the roads in? Like, if you can kind of walk me through the exact steps to getting the first tranche of lots ready, what does that look like?
Okay, so real quick question then. Is it entitled?
Yes, let's assume entitlements are in place.
Okay, so the first thing you got to do is you got to go put SWIP in, SWPPP. So it's basically just, and you can look it up, SWPPP. It's just basically all of the barriers that have to be put in place to make sure you don't have erosion, just controls any of the issue. You make your temp road and they put in those, it's not spikes, the shake-offs. So whenever you're driving back out, they make you put all the big rock and everything. And you have to have road cleaners as well. So they make sure the site stays within ordinance. And then you might have water jurisdiction, all those other issues with the DNR, especially here in Missouri. So all of that has to go in place, which SWIP, usually on a project, you should calculate about $50,000, depends on how big the project is, but you said 50 acres, right? Or 50 lots?
Sure.
Okay, 50 acres, give or take $50,000 in SWIP cost. That's just to maintain the site, make sure you put up your silt fencing, no erosion, all that other fun stuff. Or you can take the trees and mulch them and use that as your barriers as well instead of silt fence. But once that's done, you go into tree clearing because you don't want to cause any issues to the creeks, the natural waterways, nothing like that. You don't want to pollute anything. So you got to have the SWIP in place. That's why that's there. So once you're done with that though, you go into the tree clearing. I like the tree clearing aspect. I try to keep as many big trees as possible, especially some of the big oaks here in Missouri. A lot of the other stuff is just mainly firewood, but there also could be a lot of money made off that. We did really well on one of our projects where we made over 100,000 just on the tree clearing, but we try to keep as much trees as possible on that side as well. And then we replant a bunch. But back to your question, then it goes into grading. Grading could be one of your longest processes, depends on how much you have going on. But once your grading is done, that's basically, if you're phasing it 50 acres, you're probably going to phase that. So you're not going to do all one or two, maybe three phases at one time. So Serenity Woods is 53 acres. That's 3 phases. But we needed the dirt from phase 3 to move over to phase 1. So we had to do all that one at one time, if that makes sense. Sometimes it's not that way. Sometimes it is. Depends on what your engineers tell you on how you need to square that away and how you need to phase it.
I would imagine it in some cases, even despite being able to move the dirt from the high points to the low points, I mean, we still may end up with a bunch of excess dirt that needs to be hauled off. Does that ever come up on our projects?
All the time. So the whole goal with every site is to have a balanced site, but it's hard to do. You're either a little bit low or a little bit high. So you either have to bring dirt in or, haul dirt off. So you calculate that cost in as well. And then to finish out on Andrew's question though, then you're starting to go into all the utilities. So usually you handle all the wet first and then jump into the dry, which means you're putting in the stormwater, the sewer lines, water lines, all that stuff, which we do get roads in relatively quick as soon as those are put down. Our Serenity Woods and even the overlook over in Chesterfield, both those locations need lift stations. So that's an additional $500 to $1 million just for the lift station. What it does is pushes all of the sewage back out. If it's at a lower point than the main pumps that are out on freeway or wherever they're at, the city jurisdictions. Make sense?
Yeah. And on average, how long do you think that takes?
For which part?
Top to bottom, the entire process.
Depends on the parcel. So again, if you're building out, you said 10 lots at a time?
Yep.
10 lots won't take that long, but you never really could just build out the 10 because you have to put the other infrastructure in. So the 10 lots, you probably could get that done within a few months, 2 to 4 months. But here's the problem is you're probably going to end up building out another 30 or 40 of them because you have to move grading around and you have to put in the lift station on phase 3. So you couldn't do all that in phase 1. So you have to do a little bit of work on phase 3 just to get those 10 lots ready.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, it sounds like you obviously have to have full scope of the entire project on the very front end, right? Because I would imagine worst case scenario looks like you didn't plan in advance for X, Y, and Z scenario, and then you got to do like a tremendous amount of work at the very end.
Yeah, that's the last thing you want. So like you want to make sure right off the rip. That's why you got to work with a good engineer. And that's what I was mentioning a little bit ago. Engineers, huge. If you're not working with the right engineer, that entitlement process that should have took 12 months might be 24 months plus. I know because I'm still involved with one of them.
I think that kind of ties into a question I asked on the last podcast, the time in which it takes to get the land. What I'm trying to say is the land seller, because we've got we put down a deposit to the land seller that allows us to hold the land for a certain
an
amount
option
of time.
agreement. Yeah.
Right. But I would imagine at some point that land seller might think like, when is this guy going to be done? Because they're thinking like, am I just going to be hanging out to dry? Is this guy taking his sweet time to get all these entitlements and all this stuff that he says he needs to get done? I mean, does that ever cause friction between us and the land seller, especially if it takes longer than we had anticipated?
I mean, you deal with that unfortunately a lot because there's things that you can't control. So right now, I think I've talked to you about this one, Daniel, but Freeport. So that Freeport project we're doing, that's 120 lots. We need another extension. We thought we were going to have everything ready by, I think today. Yeah, actually today. And they gave us till the 23rd, which is only a few more days. But our tree mitigation isn't done. That's something we can't control because we're relying on third parties. So without that being done, we can't get the DO. We need the development order, which is the DO, to be able to close on the land. That's what the lender requires. It's just stuff you need sometimes. And there are some lenders that will close without the DO, but I will tell you firsthand, I don't like doing that anymore. Like I closed on a piece of land and I sat on it for 2 years because it was in Wildwood, Missouri, and Wildwood is about as slow as it comes. I'm sure there's other jurisdictions that are worse, but can't be much worse than Wildwood. I've seen one project take over 9 years to get approved.
Wow, that's crazy. Which I mean is why you probably, if you're going to build in Wildwood and other places where it's slower, you might as well build as many lots as you possibly can, because I would imagine the process is relatively the same between 5 houses and 100 houses. Would you say that's fairly accurate?
Yeah, pretty much. Like that, I've went over that before too. That like when you build 2 homes or one off, like I feel like it takes just as long for the entitlement process. And don't get me wrong, the horizontal versus the vertical side is quite a bit different as well. But yeah, the time frame is about the same as developing 150 lots or 200 lots or 500 lots. Makes no difference. It just costs a little bit more money because of the entitlement process. But yeah, back to what we were speaking about though, on the horizontal development side versus the vertical construction, there's a big difference on that one lot and the 50 lots. Like a one lot, you might not have to do hardly any horizontal construction. It could be almost pretty much ready. Like these two, I think you've seen them right here in Wildwood, Daniel, the
Mhm.
east properties. There might be a little bit of grading, but it's so minute. And they're already, they're right there next to a subdivision. So they already have water, electric, everything ran right to site. So it's very minuscule what we got to do there.
Yeah, it's funny. I was we had an investor come to town and we were driving through and they pointed out right down the street from your office. I don't even know who's building it. There's that big development nearby. And they're just
Kelby?
like, what about McKelvey? They're just like, what about that? Why aren't you guys building there? Like, well, why do they have it? It's just like, guys, just because like if you're just now seeing these people clearing trees, that means that they probably had this land for 1 to 2 years, but before they ever broke ground. Like they
So that is the one I will tell you. McKelvey has it. Great people. Actually, I met the owner. Very nice dude. That was the one that was under contract for 9 years, give or take back and forth with Payne Homes, which Fisher Homes bought out Payne Homes. And I procrastinated on it. I gave it 2 years ago, give or take. And I just was like, man, I just don't want to mess with that because it's taken so long. And George Stock was the engineer, so I know he knows what he's doing. He's great at what he does. But it's just trying to get the city to work with you was almost impossible. They got it approved, and I missed out on that one. So that was one I could actually say that was my fault.
Yeah. Well, we've got, I mean, shoot, man. How many other projects do we have in St. Louis or greater St. Louis?
We got over 15 plus working, so we're not hurting for any, projects at this point. But I do expect that to double just in the St. Louis market, if not triple in the next year or two. So we'll see where it goes. But again, it's quality over quantity. The horizontal still has to be quality. The vertical, if we're building it, still has to be, quality stuff.
Yeah, which kind of leads me into the question of like, how do the risk profiles differ between horizontal and vertical? I mean, from my assumption, there's a lot more stability in the horizontal, right? With the pre-sold contracts, everything that comes along with it, but it'd be easy to assume that there's probably a little bit more upside in the vertical. How do you kind of evaluate risk between the two?
Well, let me tell you this. There's a reason why vast majority of builders only do vertical, and it's pretty straightforward. So it's more profit almost always, and it's a lot less risk almost always. That's the sum up of it. Now, how does that really look? What was your first question on that though? You asked me something, then you went into
Well,
something.
just around the assumption of the vertical actually being, or the horizontal rather, being a little bit more stable because you have the locked in contract and
See, that's what So like when we have those locked in contracts, they are stable. They're about as stable as it gets. But when you're looking at it from a investor point or a bank point or our point of view, whose point of view are you looking at? And then that's how you got to kind of decide how that looks. From our point of view, it's great because we know where the land's at. We know the location. We know how fast that's going to sell. Now, someone that's an investor, they're like, well, I don't know much about land. I don't know much about this. So how is that investor going to look at this piece of land? Like it's just a piece of vacant land. Yeah, you got it pre-sold, but what's the risk associated with that? For us, feels like there is no risk because we already went through the entitlements. We already have an entitlement. Now we already have it pre-sold to, let's say, Fisher or whoever, McKelvey, whoever. There's very little risk. But what happens if there's a market downturn? Well, we bought it in a prime location, right? We know that 5-star schools are there. We know that the absorption rate's great. We know that there's tons of people moving in that area. So it's very minimal risk on our end. But there's a huge reason why those home builders don't do it because they're the back end buyer and they'd be the front end developer. On our end, we do both. Opening horizontal side, and we could build homes or we could sell them off to those major home builders, which are national and or regional builders. So we eliminate our risk in many facets, and us being able to build just gives us one extra layer of protection where, okay, we don't want to sell it. We can build it and make more profit off of it. And our investors thrive from that and they make more money as well.
Yeah, I would argue that before horizontal, I mean, all of the risk really, whether you're talking about vertical, horizontal, I would say most of that risk happens upstream during the entitlement process because whether it's taking longer than the land seller is comfortable with or uncovering some sort of ancient Indian burial ground, I mean, that's where the wrenches are going to fly is in the entitlement process. And I think that's why, go ahead, you were going to.
No, I'm not going to jump in on your thing too much. But like Old Willow, we're not even closed on it, and we're going to build 14 homes on it. It's going to be a great project, but we're going to do a phase 2 because the current seller, he didn't do a phase 1 or phase 2. But they found in phase 1 that there was RV sitting on there, and it's kind of a, I'm not going to say junkyard, but there's a bunch of cars sitting on there. So it gives us reason to do a phase 2 because the last thing you want as a developer like ourselves, Blue Onyx, is for us to be on national TV. These guys sold these to, Fisher Homes, and they let them build on it, and they didn't know anything about all this contaminated water underneath it. So people are sitting on contaminated land. You don't want to deal with that. I'd rather spend $10,000 on a phase 2 and find out, is this land good? Is the water good? Are we good to go? If not, can we remediate it for a reasonable price?
How frequently do you run into that situation?
It's rare, but you do have a lot of situations where you have to do the phase two because you might have a gas station that was sitting across the road or a bunch of used cars or whatever sitting on which usually doesn't go down deep. It's usually surface level if it's just oil leaking out of a car or something like that. But if it's a gas station, those tanks were buried underground and they could have been leaking for 10, 20, 30 years, right
It
into the
might
water.
be helpful too to even explain what a phase one and a phase two is. I know we use a term for the takedowns as well. So like, can you just explain what a phase one?
I'm only going to touch on it because it's a lot more in depth than what I'm going to say. So phase one is just kind of visual. They go out and inspect it. They look at imagery from satellites from the past, 10, 15, 20, 30 years to see what has been there. And they just do a visual inspection. So phase one will say, hey, listen, we inspected it. We see this, this, and this. These are issues that are of concern for us. Phase two, if it has to go that far, is we've seen these issues in the phase one. Now we're going to do soil testing. We're going to drill down 20, 30, 40, 50 feet deep down to the water table. And is the water contaminated? How's the soil testing come back? So it has to be sent off to labs and them tell us exactly what does that clay or what does that dirt look like? Is it clay? Does it have contamination in it? What does that look like? Which we do a lot of that during the geo, but it's completely different testing.
Yeah, I think it's good for people. And do you do like what level of environmental is done on every single project?
Phase one's always done. So we always do a phase one. It's a visual inspection, but it's done by a professional. He does all of our projects and he's great at what he does.
And do you find that like with phase twos, is that always the byproduct of like human waste? Right? If that makes sense, obviously with like gas stations and you talk about cars and all that, this, that, and the other. Would something ever be contaminated naturally?
So yes, but it's not usually naturally like just if Earth was here without humans. I'd
Right.
say probably not. It's because of something upstream, way upstream. I'm just thinking about my 132 acres I have over in Eureka. It's contaminated water over there. It had lead in it, but it was from way upstream up in St. Louis, which probably was 40, 50 miles away per the river. But they had to go through and clean all that out. It's still something that was contaminated from a company either way.
Reminds me of a property my parents looked at and nearly bought, and it was an all cash, no contingencies kind of situation.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't let them basically do anything. And like my dad turned on the water and the water was brown. And it was because the oil tanks were leaking that were in the ground, and all of that was, contaminating the water, right? So, there's a lot of different levels to it, but you got to make sure it's, obviously an incredibly different situation, an example, but these things are important.
No, dude, that's super important. And once you take a huge loss because you didn't do a thorough inspection, that $10,000 sounds minuscule versus $1 million, $1.5 million loss because you go in and remediate, or you got to go try to sell that land that you bought for 1.25 million. Now you got to sell it for $5 because it's not really worth anything. And I was making jokes yesterday. I was like, well, we just turned it into, like a motocross track. I was like, who doesn't want to ride dirt bikes, So,
Yeah.
a little off topic, but yeah, no, definitely a great question on there.
Awesome. Well, in closing, we know what the difference between horizontal and vertical construction is. We kind of know what the risks are between those two, and also that most of the risk happens upstream, which is great news for an investor. I think that's pretty compelling, knowing that if anything that can go wrong, chances are is that's going to happen long before we ever deploy one red cent of investor capital. We've got a well-oiled machine. It's all calculated risk on our part. To us, it's not exactly simple or easy, but we've just got a really well-oiled machine, and that's why people rely on us to handle those pain points for the big builders.
It definitely wasn't easy to get there, but like you said, horizontal, again, just to reiterate, is everything to put the infrastructure in to build a subdivision for our sakes or any of the major home builders. And then vertical just starts at the basement framing, roofs, everything going up. But, we do have some stuff on the horizontal side that goes up, like Daniel said, but very minuscule. So any last thoughts on your end?
No, thanks everybody for took some time to tune in, and we'll see you next week.
Definitely. Thanks, guys, for joining us. God bless, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
All right. See you guys.
Take it easy.